Hi, everybody. Before we jump into sportsbook operations, I wanted to take a minute to explain why we're starting here in this course. Casino management covers a lot of ground: table games, slots, compliance, player development, finance. And in past versions of this course, we followed a more traditional path, largely driven by the textbook. This semester, we're doing something a little different and very intentionally so. We're starting with Sportsbook because they're the most accessible form of gaming for most people today, including you. You see it on TV, you see it, the odds during the games, you see apps on your phone. Even if you've never placed a bet, you've been exposed to sports betting. I mean, DraftKings and FanDuel ads are honestly sometimes interrupted by the games given any weekend. That makes Sportsbook a powerful teaching tool. They let us connect what you already recognize in the real world to how casino operators actually think behind the scenes. Sportsbooks also lend themselves well to hands-on learning, which is why this course includes a semester-long sportsbook simulation. Now, this is the first time we're trying this, so be flexible. I want it to work every week, but we'll see. You'll be able to apply concepts week by week, not just read about them. I also want to be transparent with you. This course has been intentionally redesigned. We're blending proven elements from earlier versions of the class with more current content and tools. Some of this, including the sportsbook simulation, is being run in this format for the very first time. It's not a drawback. In fact, it mirrors the casino industry pretty well. Operators test, adjust, analyze results, and refine their approach. We'll do the same here. I'll be paying close attention to how this structure supports your learning, and thoughtful feedback is always encouraged as we go. That means reach out to me if you see some issues. If something helps you understand casino operations more clearly, I want to know. And if something can be improved, I want to know that too. With that context, let's dive in. Now, every year around Super Bowl, you'll see headlines about how much money sportsbooks made or lost on the game. And the public narrative usually sounds like, Vegas cleaned up or Vegas got crushed. What most people don't realize is that the outcome of the game itself is often the least interesting part for the sportsbook. What keeps operators up at night isn't who wins, it's how the money is coming in, how fast it's coming in, and whether it's piling up on the side. In fact, there have been Super Bowls where sportsbooks were perfectly fine with the underdog winning, and others where the favorite winning caused real exposure. That's your first clue that sportsbooks don't like fans. They don't think like fans. They don't think like gamblers. It's not that they don't like fans. They just don't think like fans. And they don't think like gamblers. Early in my career, I spent time around casino sportsbooks, not placing bets, but watching how these decisions were being made behind the counter. What struck me immediately was how calm everyone was, especially during the big games. No cheering, no groans, no emotion. And I'm talking about the people behind the counter. Because the outcome wasn't the story. The flow of money was the story. That's when it really clicked for me. Sportsbooks aren't trying to be right about games. They're trying to be disciplined about risk. And as a side note here, sportsbooks generally don't contribute a lot of revenue to the casino. They contribute a portion, yes, absolutely, but not a huge amount. You would be surprised. We make more money off of all the ancillary things that sports bettors do and the people they bring with them than we do on the sports book. A joke that was once told to me early in my career, they said we'd make more money on a putt-putt golf setup than we would with the sports book. Nonetheless, we needed to have it. Today, we're going to start reframing how you think about sports betting. Not as a fan, not as a gambler, and definitely not as someone trying to beat the system. We're going to look at sports betting the way casino operators look at it. Because sports books are not guessing games. They are pricing and risk management business that happen to operate in an entertainment environment. That distinction matters. Let me restate that. They are pricing and risk management businesses that happen to operate in an entertainment environment. And that distinction, like I said, matters. If sports books tried to predict winners and losers, they would not exist very long. The business model isn't built on being right about games. It's built on being disciplined about probability, volume, and behavior. That's the mindset I want you in before we launch the sportsbook simulation next week. Let's start with what a sportsbook actually is. At its core, a sportsbook is a pricing operation. It sets prices on uncertain outcomes, manages exposure, and earns a margin over time. That margin is often referred to as the hold. The hold is not about winning every bet. It's about managing thousands of bets across many games so that, in aggregate, the sportsbook earns predictable revenue. This is very similar to how casinos think about slot machines. Individual outcomes don't matter nearly as much as volume, time, and behavior patterns. In other words, sportsbooks don't need to be perfect. They need to be consistent. One of the biggest misconceptions about sportsbooks is that they're trying to figure out who will win a game. That's not their job. Their job is to set a line that attracts betting activity on both sides, balances risks, and protects the house from excessive exposure. Sportsbooks don't root for teams. They don't celebrate last-second touchdowns. They don't suffer heartbreak. They manage risk. And risk management is a recurring theme in this course. Now let's talk about how sportsbooks make money, because this is where a lot of myths disappear. You'll hear terms like vigorish, juice, the hold. These all point to the same concept, the built-in margin that allows sportsbooks to operate profitably over time. Even when outcomes are unpredictable, the pricing structure ensures that the sportsbook earns revenue across volume. That's why sportsbooks care far more about betting behavior than individual bets. A sportsbook doesn't panic when a favorite loses. What concerns operator is imbalance action, emotional betting surges, and exposure that isn't properly managed. Again, this is not gambling from the operator's perspective. It's controlled uncertainty. This brings us to reading the board. When you look at a betting board, it's easy to think the numbers are telling you who's going to win. They're not. They're telling you how the sportsbook is pricing probability and responding to betting activity. Point spreads, money lines, and totals are not opinions. They're signals. They tell you where money is going, how risk is distributed, what the sportsbook is trying to encourage or discourage. In this course, we're less interested in what the line is and more interested in why it looks the way it does, because the line is shaped by behavior. One of the most important things to understand about sportsbooks is line movement. Lines don't move because sportsbooks suddenly change their minds about a team. They move because money moves. When betting volume becomes unbalanced, especially from informed high-volume bettors, sportsbooks adjust lines to manage exposure and shape future behavior. Sometimes that movement is driven by real information, like injuries or weather. Other times it's driven by public perception, hype, or emotion. And here's the key insight. Sportsbooks don't care why money is coming in. They care how much, how fast, and from whom. That's a very different way of thinking than most fans have. Now let's talk about betting behavior, because this is where psychology enters the picture. Sports betting is deeply emotional. Fans bet on their favorite teams. People overestimate their knowledge. Losses trigger chasing behavior. Let me say that again. Losses trigger chasing behavior. You lost $20. Oh, I'll just place $40 on the next one to make up for it. That's called chasing behavior. Wins create overconfidence. These behaviors are all predictable, and because they're predictable, sports books design pricing, promotion, and experiences all around them. This is where sports betting becomes a hospitality experience. Sportsbooks aren't just selling bets, they're selling engagement, entertainment, and time on property, or time on an app these days. From an operator's perspective, emotion isn't a flaw in the system. It's part of the system. This is also why parlays or long shots and big win narratives exist. They're exciting. They create stories. They keep people engaged. But remember, engagement is not the same thing as advantage. And again, that's not a moral judgment. It's an operational reality. Understanding human behavior is just as important as understanding numbers in casino management. So why are we covering all this before the sportsbook simulation begins? Because next week you're going to be making decisions, and those decisions will mean very different things depending on how you approach them. If you approach the simulation like a fan, focus on teams and outcomes, you'll miss the point. If you approach it like an operator, thinking about risk, pricing, behavior, and volume, you'll start to see how casinos actually work. The goal isn't to win bets. The goal is to understand the business behind them. As you move through this week's materials, pay attention to how sportsbooks communicate through numbers, how behavior influences pricing, and how emotion plays a role in decision-making. That foundation is what we'll build on next week. And once simulations start, you'll quickly see why sportsbooks are one of the most analytically demanding and misunderstood segments of the casino industry. Thanks for listening.